Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski. And once again, as promised, we brought out the big guns. John, you want to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, hey Jim, it's good to be with you. And we have back at the mic with us today Karl Vaters. Karl was with us in episode 282. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to episode 282, please hit pause, go back, listen to 282. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so good, so rich. Karl took some time to unpack a little bit of his book, Desizing the Church, and we talked about things like church addition can become idolatry and addiction and lust, and Karl just outlined that for us so beautifully. So if you didn't hear 282, go back, listen to 282. But today in 283, we've got our friend back. And Jim, I'm going to let you start with the first question.
All right. So, first of all, Carl, thank you for coming back and thank you for being our guest. It's just great to have you, but we're not going to waste any time. Question, here we go. Number one,
Alrighty.
please. I just want you to recap. I mean,
Yeah,
I know that we just talked last week for half an hour, but could you just maybe if they didn't hear it, this will whet their appetite. What did we talk about? What's your thoughts? What's your takeaway from the last episode?
sure. Yeah, we talked primarily about the stuff from Desizing the Church. So the book came about because I have been, had the honor for the last dozen or so years to spend a lot of time with small church pastors traveling around the country and around the world and speaking at this point to thousands of pastors, mostly of small churches. And so many of them have lived under such discouragement, frustration about not being as big as so many of the church conference speakers tell them they need to be getting. And I'm convinced if I could wave a magic wand and somehow remove the burden of I have to get bigger this year from last year, if I could remove that from the shoulders of every pastor, I'm convinced I would increase the emotional and spiritual health of every pastor in every church in the world.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, to do that, that doesn't mean we're removing any drive. And that's one of the things that I often get is, well, but if we're not obsessed with getting bigger, what are we driving? I'm not talking about lack of drive. I'm not talking about lack of motivation. I'm not talking about settling for less. I'm talking about let's get rid of, as we used the word already, idolatry, lust, obsession. Let's get rid of that and replace it with a proper biblical drive to be obedient to Christ and to his principles and to lead his people well and to reach the community around us. So if we can start to do that, we'll be doing much better. So Desizing the Church really looks at 40 years now, 40 plus years of the church growth movement and says, okay, as an insider, as a part of the church growth culture that I grew up in, it's been around long enough now that we can look back, we can see some of the positives of it, but we can also see some of the unintended negative consequences of it. And I think it's important to put the word unintended there because I don't
Yeah.
see, I don't really see intentional villains. That's one of the things that my research showed. The people that I thought might be actually, they're out there because they're, rubbing their hands together with greed. Yeah, there's always some of those, but those aren't really the leaders in the church. They haven't been, and certainly haven't been the leaders in the church growth movement. So the negative consequences have really been unintentional, but they still need to be taken seriously. And so that's what we try to do in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did it so beautifully, and so we're really excited about the conversation today, Karl. You know, I know you have exposure in a broad spectrum. I wanted to ask you, what has you most optimistic
Hmm.
about pastors in the churches they serve?
Well, where do I begin? I'm 65. I have been in the church for 65 years.
Right.
I was literally born as my father was preaching a Sunday service. Okay. Like I wasn't born in the church building, but it's
Yeah.
pretty close. So I've been involved in the church for 65 plus years, and I have never been more enthused or excited about where the church is and what God is doing in the church than I am today.
Mm.
Okay.
And I want to say that clearly because too many people of my generation just look at whatever is happening today. And because it's not like what we came up with, we can't appreciate what's happening now.
Mm.
And I think there's so many good things that are happening right now. So just a couple. I think, first of all, there is a greater openness to different varieties and methods and ways of doing church than there ever has been. When I was coming up, if somebody came up with like a new idea for how to do church, it wasn't presented as an idea. It was presented as the idea that has to replace everything else.
Mhm.
So I'm old enough to remember, back in the 60s and 70s, it was a bus getting a school bus to bring all the kids from the neighborhood, and they were building. That's how it is. And then in the 90s, it was a mission statement that's going to change your church. And then it was right, but now you look around and you've got big churches, small churches, you've got house churches, you've got multi-site, you've got all kinds of different ideas going out there. And as long as you're preaching the gospel, you're faithful to His word, you're doing the things that God says the church should be doing, the methods are really wide open. That's the one thing. The second big thing that really encourages me is that new generations right now have a greater hunger for substance than maybe any younger generation that I've ever seen in my life. With the possible exception of those who were looking to find themselves in the 60s and 70s and ended up finding themselves in all kinds of, or losing themselves in all kinds of bad places. But their desire to find themselves was good. But today, I think are there still people who are chasing trivia? Yeah, there are. There always will be. But when I talk to younger people today, they are the most oversold and overhyped generation in history. So they can recognize it when they see it, which means they can also recognize and appreciate the genuine. And they have a real appreciation for that. So in our church, for instance, when we do a Bible study, we don't call it by a cute name. We just call it Philippians. Mm-hmm. And young people just show up and you're going to really go verse by verse through Philippians. You're not going to play games with it. You're just going to go verse by verse. Yeah. Okay. I'm there. That to me is really encouraging.
Karl, I'm so encouraged by what I'm seeing with students. I'm concerned by what's happening with students in terms of their mental and emotional well-being, because they're suffering at a clip now that is higher than any time in my lifetime. But what you said, we did a lot of traveling in 2024 in the fall, and everything we taught on was on mental and emotional health, well-being, and in every setting there were students with notebooks taking notes.
Yep.
Writing things down, locked in. And I thought, oh my word, this is amazing. And so I wanted to just affirm that. And then one thing that I don't know if you've seen this, Karl, but I've noticed, because we work with approximately 20 different denominations, and I have seen an openness to the Holy Spirit that I have not seen again in my lifetime from our Wesleyan friends, our Baptist friends, our missionary church friends, and it's just absolutely delightful and stunning at the same time to me.
Yeah, I see the same thing. It is very, very. I think some of it is because we are now so post-Christian, especially if you're in the Northeast states or the Western states. We've been post-Christian for long enough now that the Jesus stuff is really brand new to a lot of folks. And so when they see it, they really want to jump into it with both feet, and they don't have the habit, the tradition, or the structure to say it just means I'm going to show up in my best. I'm going to sit still while somebody talks. No, I want to participate in this thing. And I think there's those of us who have been around forever and who are multiple generation Christians and who are grateful for it, as we talked about in the last episode. I think we have as much to learn from the new generations as they have to learn from us. And I think if we open up that dialogue, there'll be a whole bunch of cool things that'll come out of it.
I was not long ago talking to a young church planter who had this vision to plant a church. I said, well, articulate it. Tell me, my job is to help you make that a reality. And he said he had a hard time with the language. And finally, he just looked at me and said, okay, I know what it's not. I said, what is it? What was it not? He said, it's not skinny jeans, smoke machines, and Krispy Kremes. It's couches, it's coffee, it's conversation, it's lifelong relationships, it's meaningful seasons. And I thought, wow, that's, I loved hearing that because, as a youth pastor, we're drawing a crowd with the world's biggest popsicle. And now I've got
Yeah,
this generation's like, I don't want the world's biggest popsicle. I want a meaningful conversation with somebody that I trust. I'll take that over a big
yeah,
popsicle any day of the year, of the week.
any
We
day.
talk about
Yeah.
the good things that are happening. What are you seeing out there in the world and the nation and your interactions that's causing you concern? Again, we're probably talking to leaders right now, and maybe we share that concern, or maybe we're blind to that concern.
Yeah.
What are you seeing that we should all be aware of?
Yeah. In a word, polarization.
Mm.
And I'm not the first one to make that statement. I have that concern, obviously.
Yeah, I'm offended that
The,
you said it, and me and my tribe know.
well, that's why I said it, because if you're going to be offended by it, we it's so obvious that
Right now.
we all know how to go into the stereotype of it, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, in desizing the church, I actually lay this out. I've been in ministry long enough now, and a part of the church my entire life, that I've seen three different big kind of waves come through. So in the 1960s and 70s, it was the revivalism wave. If you were going to talk to a pastor about what they wanted for their church, they would use revivalistic language.
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s, 90s, and O's, that changed to the strategizing wave. If you talk to pastors about what their church needed, they're going to use strategizing words. They're going to use management words. They're reading management books even out of the secular marketplace. And
Yeah.
if you get this thing in range, and if you have if you have this percentage going to small groups and this percentage going to this and this percentage, right? It was all a bunch of good stuff, but it was all about strategizing for the 80s, 90s, and O's. Now in the teens, 20s, and probably well into the 30s, we're into a third wave. And what this wave is, as far as I'm concerned, I call it the activism wave.
Okay.
Mm.
So now when you're talking to a whole lot of churches, church leaders, pastors, and so on, what they want to do is they've got a base that they're speaking to, and they want to get their base numbers up. And if my base numbers can be bigger than the base numbers on the other side of the equation, whether it's political or theological or whatever, and it's creating it's feeding into the polarization thing where I mean, so often now people are so quick to condemn anybody who's even slightly theologically different from them as not even a real Christian. And
Right.
so it's
Yeah.
left against right, or in a lot of places, it's really right against not quite so far right,
Right. Right.
or really left against not quite so far left,
Yeah.
both theologically and politically. And we just love clumping people into camps.
Yeah.
And excluding anybody who doesn't match every single thing. In fact, to the point where I've got friends who are good Christians, who are good friends and have been for a long time, who are mad at me now, not because we have theological or political differences. If you were to take a sheet and list theological imperatives and list political ideas and ask each of us to check boxes, we might check every box exactly the same. The only difference is between me and them is I'm not angry enough as far as they're concerned.
Mm.
And my lack of anger must mean lack of passion, must mean that I'm not really serious about the thing. And that's literally the only difference. I'm just not angry enough. And I don't see, so that kind of polarization, I'm angry about not people being too angry. I don't know what, but the polarization. Yeah.
So Karl, can we drill down on that for just a minute? What would you say to a pastor who, what's the, how do we prevent ourselves from going too far into that, or how do we deal with that wave? It's
Right. And teach our
happening.
people.
We
And
see
teach our
it,
people to
right?
do the same. Yeah.
What would be a thought or two you might have to help a pastor navigate that?
Well, as I heard somebody say recently, I think discipleship fixes everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a big, tall guy. He looks a lot like you.
Yeah, from the last episode, we talked about this. I really, more and more over the last few years, I have come back over and over and over again to it, the wisdom of Jesus and telling us to go make disciples. Discipleship fixes everything. Over the last few years in our congregation, for instance, and I've been a part of a congregation for 32 years. I was 25 years the lead pastor. I was 7 years on staff. And now for this past year, I've been off staff, but it's still my home church and things are going really, really well there. And we've gone through all of the seasons that everybody's gone through over the last 32 plus years, including all of the COVID stuff and all of the political stuff. And we have been able to go through it the last 15 to 20 years after we, fixed some of the damage that was there when I arrived. We've been able to go through the last 15, 20 years without a single significant confrontation between camps and the church. Mm-hmm. And it's not because everybody's the same politically. We're not. Right. It's not even because everybody believes in exactly the same thing theologically. We have a very strong theological statement in our church, and all of our leaders are required to have a core biblical theology. But we've got a whole bunch of explorers and seekers and wonderers and questioners and disagreeers in the church. But we've been able to create an environment where we can have these conversations, where we can hold to what we know is biblical truth, but where you're allowed to ask crazy, stupid, and obnoxious questions, and we won't call you crazy, stupid, or obnoxious for asking them.
That's the title of the next book. That's the
title.
There
we go. Crazy, stupid, and obnoxious.
Yeah. How to depolarize your church from crazy, stupid, and obnoxious people. I would buy that.
There we go. Yeah, and none of that came easily. I'm talking 3 decades worth of work here. And it was almost 2 decades before this stuff really kind of settled in and went, okay, we're actually doing this well now. But we can get there. We've got to play the long game. We've got to do the discipleship game with integrity. And I'm using the word game, and I don't like the word game. It's not a game, obviously. But that's what we've got to do. We've got to be in this for the long haul. Quick answers they come quickly, they leave quickly. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be able to have something stable, you've got to put the time in, and you've got to invest in it with integrity. Yeah.
So, Karl, I'd like to pivot here a little bit as we've got a couple more questions for you. I want to get more personal, if that's okay.
Sure.
I've been watching how God's been using you, and you've been literally all over the world in the last year or so. How have you kept yourself healthy in the face of the demand on your time?
Yeah, that's a really important, because here I am in my 60s and I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. Right. And the small church pastor that didn't even get a job offer from another church and was never asked to go speak at a conference or a campground. My youth pastor was speaking at youth conferences all around the country and around the world. And I was just like, yeah, I'll see you when you get back home, because I'll just be sitting here with these 100 or so folks. And then all of a sudden that switch flips, and all of a sudden I'm doing all this travel and doing it in a new way. So I'm not just busy, but I'm having to learn how to do it at the same time in my late 50s and 60s. So, so that's a challenge. What the primary thing I've learned is that the busier you are, the more important it is to prioritize rest and input with your activity and output.
Okay.
So when I'm traveling, for instance, last year, in February and March, had the most brutal travel schedule we've ever had. In February, we were gone from home for 2 full months. In February, we were in every corner of the nation, literally Washington State to Florida, New York State to California, literally every corner of the contiguous states in February. And then in March, we did 12 conferences in Europe.
Oh my.
It was. But there were opportunities. They came up. We took advantage of them. I'm grateful we did them. It was an amazing, amazing 2 months. But I knew that when I got home, I was going to need some serious recovery time. So I scheduled a couple of weeks of downtime with no appointments, with nothing. And the temptation, of course, was I'm gone for 2 months. So now when I get back, I'm going to have to pick up everything. I'm going to have to schedule all these appointments, because for 2 months, I'm telling people I'm on the road. I can't do your podcast. I can't write that article for you. I can't do whatever. And it was like, no, because of that, I have to schedule that downtime. So I've come to understand and to appreciate one, that I have to proactively schedule, put downtime in my schedule, because no one else is going to put it in there for me.
Right.
And then 2, I have to see it not as a break from productivity, but as a necessary element of productivity.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
good.
Boy, that when you mentioned that schedule, I just can't even imagine. I mean, we're talking about time change, language,
Oh, yeah.
accommodations, food, your days, your night, your night's your day. You have to be on. I imagine like when you speak in the United States, when you're over in Europe, like no one's heard this message before. It's been literally for decades growth or something's wrong. And for you to
Yeah.
say maybe something's wrong, maybe it's not, is a I
Yeah.
mentioned everybody wants to have a conversation with you. They all want you to come to the church and speak, you know.
Yeah, and the translation issues and
Yeah.
everything
Oh,
from
yeah.
Florida to New York to Europe. So the clothing, I mean, we had to carry winter and summer clothes with us. Yeah. I look back at it with nothing but joy because we were able to organize it well. But the biggest one of the big reasons I can look at it joyfully is because both before and I said after, but before as well. Before as
Yeah.
well, we had a very slow period of time. So we basically blocked 3 months out of our
Yeah.
schedule where we're just going to have to say no to anything other than these things that we have put on our calendar. We
Right.
we can't live reactively during this period of time. We have to draw some real serious boundaries. We have to say no to some other things that we're probably going to want to say yes to, because our recovery time is just as important as our output time.
Right. In your book, The Grasshopper Myth, you talked about how the church was small and then grew for a while and then kind of did the accordion and what that
Mm.
did to your heart and your mind. And here we are now, years later, people know the name of that book because they know
Yeah.
you and you've been to Europe and you've been all over the United States and you're living in a van by the river, with your wonderful. I can only imagine a wonderful wife that's with you on this trip. Submission, but your mission has a capital M in it, so it's not just submission. So how do you like you haven't changed, I guess, in the times that I've known you. I've always enjoyed your conversations, but you never speak arrogantly that I've ever heard. You never speak with I've been everywhere twice and here's my t-shirt and buy my book. We have to ask you for information. You didn't mention the grasshopper myth. I did. You didn't mention, desizing the church. We did. So how are you still you in spite of I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're a success. I'm sorry about that, Karl. I really, you know what I mean? But you're a known entity now and people want you, but you're still you.
um,
Not many
yeah.
people that do what you do and I want to go fishing with. But I've always thought I love
Yeah, no,
fishing.
yeah, no.
You know?
I hear. First of all, thank you. I appreciate that of the compliments that I regularly receive, and I do. People ask me about that, and I'm so grateful for what God has given to me. I'm so grateful for the kind people like you who say such nice things about me. My my love tank is constantly filled with people affirming the positive things about me, and I take that with real gratefulness. I used to push it off and go, oh no, thank you.
Right.
I, I mean that. I'm really, really grateful for that. Of my love languages, words of affirmation is my top one. So you just gave me a
Yeah.
little top off today. I really appreciate that.
Mm.
And that's one of the things I recognize that's saying, "Hey, you did a good job" is more important than, quite frankly, although I'll take the money, more important than a good paycheck to me as far as my emotional well-being is concerned. Okay, hey, that really helped me. That really blessed my church. That means way more to me than most of the other things that people seem to be looking for with this. So one of them. So to answer your question, one of them is some sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
But to arrive at self-awareness, uh, I have come to understand, or I'm trying to better understand the things that feed into that self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody stands by themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
can't on my own become self-aware and become a stable person. I have to realize, okay, who and what am I leaning on, and are the things that I'm leaning on healthy things to lean on?
Yeah.
This is where addiction becomes dangerous, and so on,
Yes.
and numbers chasing becomes dangerous because I'm leaning on something that can't support me.
Mm-hmm.
So number one is my relationship with Jesus.
Right.
I live literally every day in greater conscious gratefulness for the person, the work, the sacrifice, and the salvation of Jesus
Mm.
than I ever had before. Every single day,
Yeah.
it's better. And yeah,
Mm.
Love it.
okay, that's one.
No,
That's fun.
And the tears are only going to get worse as it goes. Secondly, my relationship with my wife, Shelley.
I knew that was coming.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, you know, when we were going through some difficult seasons at the church, there would be some people who were real concerned for me who'd come, and this was years ago, would come to me and go, "How do you handle that? I mean, you're working so hard, and this person said that mean thing about you or whatever." And I would tell them, if I've got peace at home,
Mhm.
I can put up with anything outside the house.
Right.
Mm.
And we have worked hard for 40 plus years now. And we've worked. I mean, it's been work because I'm not as easy to live with as I seem. I'm not as often as you. I'm not as awesome as you just said I am, Jim. Um,
Just we're interviewing her next, so be careful what you
yeah,
say.
yeah.
It's its way.
Uh, so yeah, that. And then thirdly, I have been unbelievably blessed. My parents are both still alive and well and live very close to me. All three of our kids are alive and well and live close to us. Both our grandkids live just 2 miles from us. Both my sisters and their families live really close to us. Our family, we have an amazing family heritage, people who are godly, people who live really close to us, who are supportive of each other. So we have this community and then this amazing congregation that, yeah, I haven't been the lead pastor for 7 years now. I haven't been on staff for over a year. Why do you keep going to that church? Because for 25 years as a lead pastor, making more mistakes than you can possibly imagine, they lived with me through all of my mistakes. If I were to tell you some of the stories of how they stepped up and stood beside us and are currently doing so, even financially, as we have gone off onto what is really the mission field. So we're doing all this travel, but virtually every time we're outside the borders of the US and Canada, it's costing us money, not bringing us money.
Right.
And the way they have continued to step up and the generosity of them has just been extraordinary. So I live a life of constant, conscious gratefulness.
Right.
That's so good. And Carl, as you were unpacking that, I think as a ministry experiences amazing fruit and it expands, there is this war against those things that you just mentioned.
Yep. Yep.
There's this battle for time with Jesus. There's this temptation to think, wow, look what I've accomplished.
Right.
And we forget the fact that we can't even breathe without Jesus' help.
Yeah.
And the larger the ministry gets, there is this tendency for there to be less people around you
Yes.
who will speak into your life and say, "Hey, you're irritable. What's wrong with you?" Or and call you out. And so that's the thing about six. Well, there's a lot of things about growth that are dangerous, but I just think that can happen without you even realizing it's happening. And so it's just wonderful to hear as God is blessing and you're seeing amazing fruit that you're staying who you are and you're staying grounded. And it's because of the time and effort you put in every day to be with the Lord, uh, your wife and the marriage, and then this extended group around you who not only support you. I would imagine that if you need a little rebuking, that they're up
Oh,
for
yeah.
the task, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And I depend on them to do so. I've had a couple opportunities, not many, but I've had a couple opportunities to be like one of the speakers at really large conferences, just 4 or 5 times. Usually I'm in the room with somewhere between 50 and 200 people. That's my typical size that I'm speaking to. But a couple times I've been in a larger room, and most recently one was in last year when we were in Europe. I spoke to a conference in Germany to 7,000 pastors in the room,
Wow.
which, like in Germany, 700 pastors. How do you get 700 pastors together, let alone 7,000? It was crazy. And it was interesting in that situation and in a couple others similar to it. There's a green room where all the speakers go and they kind of hang around there. And every time I've been there, there's an adrenaline to that size. Mm-hmm. There's an excitement to that. There's even, how do you sleep after it kind of a thing. It really is. So, and I get how that adrenaline could be addicting.
Yeah.
Because I felt it a couple times and gone, oh, I can see where somebody would want to chase after this. And then I get in the green room and I get to meet some of these other speakers, and I could give you names that everybody would recognize. And, whether they remember me today or not is unlikely, but, I remember meeting them. But it struck me after doing this 2 or 3 times in green rooms, and there were a couple repeat people in those green rooms, really good folks, godly people who love the Lord, but who are constantly on stages of that size. And then they go home to a church where they're pastoring a church of that size. Right. And in conversations with them, what I'm getting from them is they live their lives green room to green room to green room to green room. Mm-hmm. And I don't, those who are able to do so and maintain their integrity and maintain their emotional and spiritual health, I have great admiration for that, because I don't think I could.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if they do that and they're able to, God bless them, but they're going to have to work harder at their emotional and spiritual health than I have to.
Right. Mm. I love that you said your wife is one of those key voices. I had a friend just the other day say, my wife sounds a lot like the Holy Spirit, only louder. And I thought that's a really neat way to say that, because a still small voice of the Holy Spirit versus the, hey, you knucklehead, that our spouse is allowed to say when we're being knuckleheads. I would imagine when you're pastoring a small church in Southern California, it's easy to know who your friends are, but it probably gets harder to know who your friends are when you're the guy on the stage. And I just love that you've navigated that well. And it does take a village to raise a pastor, so I'm glad that you got that village. And again, to everybody that's listening right now, if you're pastoring, if you have a dream of leading, you need a village. If you have a dream of leading, you need a marriage that you can be honest with. If you have a dream of leading something, you need accountability. You need friends that are not impressed with you, that don't owe you anything, and you don't owe them anything. And you need to ask them honest questions and let them answer them back. And again, I know John's thought on this many times, that thought of having your crew, having your people that you can always call in the middle of the night. You're 1, you're 3, you're 12, you're 120. Make sure you've got those people in your life. So again, Rich, as always. John, do you want to close us out today? You want me to do it?
Oh, you can do it, Jim. But I just want to say, Karl, thanks again for giving us your time. And would you, before Jim closes us, would you tell us where we can get a copy of Desizing the Church?
Sure. Yeah, the easiest thing is to go to my website, karlvaters.com. You got to spell it right, Karl with a K. Vaters starts with a V, T in the middle. Don't forget the S at the end. But you can get the books anywhere. But karlvaters.com is the clearinghouse for everything from the books to the articles, the podcast, videos, and everything else.
I tried to look it up last time. I spelled it wrong, and a guy with a black mask on a respirator came up on my screen. I think, and that is something that most people don't know, that you actually named your cat Darth. So that
did name our cat Darth.
Can name your grandchildren.
Exactly. We figured we'd burn it on the cat, because they might name the kid after the movie, but they ain't going to name the kid after the cat.
Oh, that's a great story. Love it.
Always great. Always great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your wisdom. Thank you so much to those who've been listening and watching. And we hope that this has been fruitful. I'm going to go chew on this now. I've got things to think about. And again, having that iron that can sharpen that iron is vital. So thanks for trusting us with some time. Thanks, gentlemen, for speaking and sharing your hearts so wonderfully with people that are listening and watching. And know this, we're praying for you. We really do hope to be helpful to you if there's a need that we can meet. Convergecoach.com. The very first thing you'll see at the top of the page is let's connect for half an hour. Let's just spend some time and hear your story. And it doesn't cost anything. So we promise you that you'll get your money's worth. That's absolutely true, because it's free. So we hope to hear from you soon. If you're flying and you don't need our help, man, we're praying for you anyway. Go have fun and win the world to Jesus and make disciples, and continue to lead from alignment.